This is the first video on comparing fractions. In this video, we're going to look at three different strategies. The first one is looking at fractions that have common denominators. Then we're going to compare fractions that are unit fractions, and then compare fractions with common numerators. First, we're going to look at comparing fractions with common denominators. This is definitely the easiest comparative relationship. The question here is which is greater, 5/8 or 7/8? So when we look at the fraction 5/8, the 8 that's my denominator tells me that there are 8 equal parts in the figure. And the 5 means that there are 5 that are shaded. So if we're looking at two fractions that both have the same denominator, then we know that both of our figures have pieces that are exactly the same size. So I know the 8 pieces over here are the same size as the 8 pieces over here. And so I'm just looking at which one has more pieces that are shaded. 5/8 is obviously less than 7/8 because 5 is less than 7. We will go ahead and name 7/8 as our greater fraction. Next, we're going to compare unit fractions. A unit fraction is any fraction that has a numerator of 1. So here we've got 1/3 and 1/10. So I need to shade in my figures down below. 1/3 means that there is one of these 3 pieces. And over here 1/10, we're only going to have one of the 10 pieces. Now, understanding unit fractions is critical to having a good foundational understanding of fractions, because students need to really see this relationship that as our denominator increases, over here we've got 1/10, the pieces get smaller. Let me say that one more time because it's so important. The greater the denominator, the smaller the piece. So we know that since 1/3 has a smaller denominator than 1/10, and both of my numerators are the same, that 1/3 is my greater fraction. Now we're going to compare fractions with common numerators. This really builds on an understanding of comparing unit fractions, but now instead of having a numerator of 1, we can have a numerator that is another number, but both of them are the same. So here I have 6/8 on the left. 6 of my 8 pieces are shaded. Now I made the figure the same size on the other side, but I divided it into 20 equal parts because my denominator is 20. So we have 6/20. Well, it's very easy when we're looking at our pictorial models to see that 6/8 is greater than 6/20. But if we were to take those away, we need to develop an understanding to where we could pick the correct answer without a model. So if I'm looking at my fractions, I need to remember the greater the denominator, the smaller the piece. So if I have 6 pieces, I know that these are going to be much smaller over here because it's divided into 20 of them. Whereas on the other side, the same figure is only divided into 8 pieces, so they're much greater in size. Now we're going to go ahead and use those 3 strategies that we learned to compare these sets of fractions. So let's look at this first set right here. We have 3/5 and 3/7. The strategy we want to use is comparing common numerators. So each one has 3 pieces. Now I know that the greater the denominator, the smaller the piece. So over here, these are going to be smaller pieces. While I have the same number as in 3/5, these are going to be greater. So I know 3/5 is greater than 3/7. Let's look at another set. 8/24 and 12/24. Here they both have common denominators. That means they have the same size pieces, we just have different numbers of them. Here I have 8 of those pieces, here I have 12. So we know that 12 would be greater. 12/24 is greater than 8/24. Let's look at this pair of fractions down below. 6/8 and 6/9. We can use our common numerators to compare. So each of them have 6 pieces, but the greater the denominator, the smaller the piece is going to be. So I know that these over here are going to be bigger in size. 6/8 is greater than 6/9. And our last set of fractions, these are our unit fractions because they have a numerator of 1. We have 1/3 and 1/5. And you know what I'm going to say. The greater the denominator, the smaller the piece. So 1/3 is going to be greater than 1/5.